Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to start in a place that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a room that you've probably been in or at least visited someone in, and you know the specific texture of the air there.
It's a room that is usually very, very quiet.
Painfully quiet. We are talking about the silence, specifically the silence of the miraculous. And we're going to be unpacking a really dense, truly fascinating stack of research today. We're primarily focusing on J.R. Ahmed's work, the Quran, and the rationality of divine signs.
Really challenging text.
It is, and I want to set the stage exactly how Ahmed does because it's so visceral. It starts in the world of the empiricist, the person who only believes what they can test, what they can measure, and what they can see with their own two eyes.
And the setting for this test?
The hospital ward.
Exactly, the hospital ward. And I just want you to picture it for a second. The stark, buzzing, fluorescent lights that never really seem to turn off.
That constant hum and the smell of antiseptic and floor wax. And then there's the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. It is a place of absolute, just brutal reality.
There's no filter there.
None at all. It is biology in its rawest, most unforgiving form.
And yet it's also a place of, well, intense spiritual desperation.
Right. In that very room, you have people praying harder than they have ever prayed in their entire lives.
Yeah.
You have families bargaining with the universe, with God, with whatever they think is listening.
They're just hoping for a miracle.
Exactly. And we hear stories, don't we? We hear those whispers in the hallway.
All the time.
Oh, his cancer went into remission completely unexpectedly, or she woke up from the coma when every single doctor said she was brain dead.
Right. And we call those hidden cures. They're always internal. They're, by their very nature, ambiguous.
Yeah.
You can't quite put your finger on the mechanism.
Well, here's the brutal question that the source poses right at the beginning. And it's a question that, it just stops the conversation cold.
It really does.
Why do we never, ever see a missing leg grow back?
That is the empiricist's hook.
It's such a hook. It just catches you. If miracles are real, if divine intervention is a thing that actually happens in our world, why does it seem to stop at the skin? Why can God supposedly fix a tumor that we can't see without an MRI, something where you can always argue, well, maybe the body just fought it off on its own.
Right. Maybe it was a misdiagnosis. There's always an out.
There's always an out. But he won't regenerate a severed arm in a flash of light. That specific silence, the absence of the truly undeniable, the visible restoration of a limb, that is where we're starting today.
And it's a heavy place to start, but it's absolutely necessary. Because what we're really exploring today is a clash between two fundamental ways of viewing the entire universe.
Two completely different operating systems.
That's a great way to put it. On one side, you have the human craving for what the source calls the magic show.
The magic show.
We want the flash, the bang, the rule-breaking wonder that proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that there is something else out there.
Yeah.
We desperately want the silence to be broken.
We want the sky to rick open. We want the statue in the church to weep real tears. We want the laws of physics to just, take a coffee break for a minute so we can feel special.
Precisely. We want the heartbeat of the universe to skip a beat, just for us. But on the other side, and this is where J.R. Ahmed's work takes us, is the system.
The system.
The idea that the silence isn't an absence, that the silence is actually the sound of a machine that is running so perfectly, so relentlessly, that it doesn't need to make a noise.
So we're moving from the disappointment of the magic show to the awe of the grand orchestration.
That's it.
And let me tell you, the path to get there is not what I expected at all. It involves atheists, ancient scriptures, tidal physics, and a complete deconstruction of one of the most famous stories in human history.
It really redefines what it means to be, quote-unquote, well-informed about the intersection of faith and reason. It's a text that challenges the believer and the skeptic in, I think, equal measure.
I agree completely. So let's dive in. Section 1. The atheist's query. The source material starts by giving full, serious weight to the skeptic. It doesn't build a straw man just to knock it down.
Not at all. It says, look, the skeptic has a very, very powerful point.
It does. It acknowledges what it calls the problem of scarcity and smoke.
Scarcity and smoke. I love that phrasing.
Me too. And the core argument here is about probability and benevolence. The atheist asks a very, very logical question. If God is boundless, meaning infinite in power, and if God is benevolent, meaning he wants us to know him, he wants a relationship.
Then why is the evidence so rare? Why is it so random, so scattered?
Yeah, the text uses the phrase, a whisper in the breeze. Why are miracles always anecdotal? It's always, my cousin's friend saw this thing happen in a remote village. Or, I read a story about a guy in the 1800s.
It's always 3 steps removed. It's never on the 6 o'clock news with corroborating footage from 12 different camera angles.
Never. And that lack of, corroboration crashing down, as the source puts it, is key. It talks about the fragility of anecdotes.
And in any other field, we'd recognize that immediately. In a court of law or in a scientific lab, anecdotal evidence is the weakest kind of evidence there is. It can be a starting point for an investigation, but it's not proof of anything.
It's what scientists call N1 data. It's singular, it's unrepeatable, and therefore it's completely unverifiable. You just have to take someone's word for it.
And that's not a satisfying foundation for a worldview, at least for an empiricist.
Not at all. And then you layer on top of that the historical perspective. The skeptic points out that the space for these claims, for these miracles, is shrinking.
This is the famous God of the gaps argument.
Right. Let's unpack that for a second, because it's absolutely central to the whole critique.
God of the gaps is the idea that we use God as a placeholder explanation for whatever science hasn't figured out yet. It's a retreating frontier of ignorance.
So, 1,000 years ago, you see lightning flash, you hear thunder. What is it?
Well, it's a God bowling. Or Zeus is angry and he's throwing a tantrum. It's a supernatural event.
Exactly. You get a terrible infection. It's a demon or a curse put on you by an enemy. A long drought happens. It must be divine punishment for the king's sins.
These were the explanations because we didn't have the mechanics. We didn't understand the underlying system. But then meteorology comes along and explains thunder. We understand static discharge, atmospheric pressure.
Poof. God is gone from the thundercloud.
Then germ theory explains the infection. We understand bacteria and viruses.
So the gap where God used to live gets filled with data. God gets evicted from the thunder, then he gets evicted from the plague, then from the weather.
And the source points out that now in the 21st century, we are down to the very, very tiny edges of biology and consciousness. We're down to things like spontaneous remission or the placebo effect. The gaps are getting microscopic.
And even those gaps are closing fast. The placebo effect is, it's fascinating, the idea that the mind can literally convince the body to heal itself. But as the skeptic rightly points out, that's a biological mechanism.
It is. We can map it. We can see the endorphins releasing. We can see the changes in brain chemistry on an fMRI. It's not magic. It's just an incredibly complex psychosomatic system we're only now beginning to understand.
So the skeptic looks at that and says, that's not a miracle. That's just biology we're finally getting a handle on.
And that brings us right back full circle to the amputated limb.
Back to the hospital ward.
Exactly. Biology can't regrow a human limb. We don't have the genetic coding for that kind of large-scale regenerative growth, not like a salamander or a starfish does.
Not yet, anyway.
Right, not yet. So because that natural mechanism doesn't exist in our biology, the miracle never, ever happens there. For the empiricist, that is a damning correlation.
It's almost a perfect one-to-one relationship.
It is. If God only acts where nature already allows for the possibility, however remote, is he really acting at all? Or is God just a label we're slapping on the parts of nature we find surprising or hard to explain?
That is the verdict of the first section from this perspective. The silence in that hospital ward is not neutral. It's evidence of absence. If God was there, the lid would grow back, since it doesn't.
The logical conclusion is that he isn't.
Right.
And then you add the next layer, which is just as damning, the problem of subjectivity.
Right. The source talks about psychological filters.
And it has this great line, wishes win the fight. I love that.
It's so human, isn't it? We see what we want to see.
Absolutely. We have a massive, well-documented confirmation bias. If you're running late and you pray for a parking spot and then you find one right in front of the building, what do you say?
It's a miracle. You tell everyone. You remember it for weeks.
Right. But if you pray for a parking spot and you end up having to park 6 blocks away and walk in the rain, what happens?
You just forget about it. You don't count it as God failed. You don't even log it as a data point against the hypothesis. You just edit it right out of your personal data set.
Exactly. You only count the hits, never the misses. And that is the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy in a nutshell.
Latin for after this, therefore because of this.
Correct. It's assuming that because event B happened after event A must have caused event B. I prayed, then I got better, therefore the prayer cured me. Without a control group, without blinding, It's just a correlation. It's not causation.
And then, for me, the final nail in the coffin for the magic show model is the rival faiths paradox. This one always trips people up.
It's a huge problem. You have a Christian in Lourdes, France, claiming a miraculous healing proves the divinity of Jesus and the intercession of Mary.
Okay. And then on the same day, you have a Muslim in Mecca who feels a sense of profound peace and attributes it to the power of the Quran.
And a Hindu at the Ganges who sees a vision of Vishnu and believes it affirms their path.
So you have 3 different people, all claiming a unique, supernatural event that proves their specific and often mutually exclusive truth claim.
Right. And logically, they can't all be the exclusive truth if they're all relying on the exact same type of evidence, a subjective personal experience to prove contradictory things.
It's like 3 different companies all claiming a patent on the same invention.
Yes. It just doesn't work. As the source puts it, in reason's bright arena, they effectively cancel each other out. It becomes a zero-sum game where the currency of miracles becomes worthless because of hyperinflation. Everyone is printing their own.
So we're left with a situation where the traditional view of miracles, the lightning bolts, the suspended laws of physics, the whole magic show is just, it's intellectually unsatisfying.
It feels shaky, it feels subjective, it feels like smoke.
Exactly, like smoke. And this is where most of these conversations just stop. The believer gets defensive and says, well, you just have to have faith, and the skeptic gets triumphant and says, see, there is no evidence, and then everyone just goes home angry.
They talk past each other.
Completely. But this source, this is where it does something really, really interesting. It pivots.
It pivots hard.
This is section 2, the rationalist pivot. And honestly, this was the biggest surprise for me reading through Ahmed's work. You expect a religious text or a defense of a religious text to come out swinging and say, no, no, the magic is real. You just aren't looking hard enough. The leg did grow back once in the 14th century.
But it doesn't do that at all.
No, it's the opposite. The source claims that the Quran actually agrees with the skeptic's critique of the magic show.
Which is a fascinating, almost counterintuitive twist. The text explicitly references Surah 6, verses 109 through 111. It talks about people swearing their strongest oaths, by God, that if a miracle came to them, a physical, undeniable, knockdown, drag-out sign, they would believe.
And the Quran's response is basically, no, you wouldn't.
It's so blunt. It says, even if we caused the angels to descend to them and the dead to speak to them, even if we gathered all things before them, face to face, they would not believe.
That is such a bold statement. It's a complete rejection of the efficacy of the magic show. It's saying the problem isn't a lack of evidence.
The problem is the psychology of disbelief. The argument here is that belief based on a trick, on a spectacle, isn't actually faith at all.
It's just a reaction.
It's just a reaction to a stimulus. Think about it. If I see a man levitate and fly across this room right now, I don't suddenly believe in his moral philosophy. I don't suddenly adopt his message of justice or mercy.
No, you just believe he knows how to fly, or you believe he's got a hidden wire and you're trying to figure out how the trick works.
Exactly. It doesn't convince your heart of a deeper truth. It just amazes your eyes. If you need a supernatural bludgeon, a cosmic hammer, to force you to believe, that's not what the source calls willing openness.
It's not submission to a truth, it's submission to a bigger gun. It's being overpowered, not convinced.
Precisely. And there is this incredible dramatic scene that the source describes, referencing Surah 17, verses 90 to 93. It's like a scene right out of a movie.
It really is. You have the skeptics of Mecca, and they're getting frustrated with the prophet. They are done with the poetry. They're done with the warnings about morality and justice.
They're done with the talk. They're demanding their version of a Hollywood blockbuster.
Yeah, I have the list of demands here. It's incredibly specific, almost like a contract writer for a rock star.
It's amazing.
They say, we will not believe in you until you make a spring gush from the very ground for us. That's demand number 1.
Okay.
Or until you have a garden of date palms and grapes and make rivers flow abundantly through them.
So terraforming. Got it.
Then it gets bigger. Or you make the sky fall on us in pieces, as you claim.
Whoa.
Or you bring God and the angels before us face to face.
That's a pretty big ask.
It keeps going. Or you have a house of gold.
It's, a casual house of gold.
In my favorite. Or you climb a ladder up to the sky. And even then, we won't believe in your ascent until you bring down a book for us that we can actually touch and read.
Wow. They really covered all their bases.
These are tangible, empirical, rule-breaking demands. They want the laws of physics shattered for their personal entertainment and verification. They are saying, point blank, do a magic trick and we will follow you.
And the response that the prophet is commanded to give in the text is so understated, it's almost jarring. He doesn't say, okay, let me check with the boss and see if we can arrange the gold house for next Tuesday.
No, he simply says, "Exalted is my Lord. Was I ever anything but a human messenger?"
It is a profound no. A complete and total refusal.
It's a refusal to even engage on those terms. It's like someone challenging a physicist to a fistfight to prove the theory of relativity. It's the wrong test for the wrong claim.
And this, right here, is the critical shift in the entire book. The expert analysis in the source highlights this as the moment the argument pivots from the supernatural to the systemic.
Say more about that.
By refusing to perform magic, the text is taking a powerful stance. It's declaring that the credibility of the message does not and should not rest on pyrotechnics. It rests on something else entirely, something more stable.
And that something else is what the source calls Sunnat Allah.
That's it.
Which brings us to section 3. And this concept, the inviolability of the system, this is where the reframing really begins.
It is. Sunnat Allah is a core concept, and it translates roughly to the way of God or the practice of God. It's like God's standard operating procedure.
And the source cites verses like Surah 33.62 and 17.77, which state, and this is a direct quote, "You will not find in the way of Allah any change."
No change, no alteration.
That's a shockingly strong claim for a religious text. Usually religion is all about the exception, the intervention, the break in the pattern. But this is arguing for the absolute constant, the unchangeable law.
Now, think about the theological implications that the source draws out from this. It's really a brilliant critique of the God of the gaps model, but from the other side. Well, if God has to constantly break his own laws, if he has to suspend gravity, stop time, or violate the rules of biology to perform a miracle, what does that imply about the laws themselves?
It implies they were insufficient or flawed in the first place.
Exactly. It's like, whoops, I designed the law of gravity, but now I need to save this one person, so let me just turn it off for a second and then turn it back on.
It implies a designer who is constantly patching up a leaky, buggy code. If you're a software engineer and you have to constantly manually intervene to stop your program from crashing, you're not a very good coder.
A perfect code runs itself. A perfect design anticipates every edge case. So the rationalist reality being presented here is that the laws of the universe are absolute and unchanging, precisely because the designer is absolute and perfect.
The miracle isn't the suspension of the law.
The miracle is the perfection of the law. The fact that it runs without fail, second after second, for billions of years.
So instead of a God who hides in the shadows where science fails, this presents a systemic God who is revealed through the consistency of physics, the predictability of chemistry, the elegance of biology.
The fact that the sun rises every single morning isn't luck. That's the miracle. The fact that an acorn, which is so small, contains all the information to build a massive oak tree, that's the miracle.
And this brings us to the crucial distinction the source makes between ayat and sir.
Yes, sir is the Arabic word for magic. It implies illusion, trickery, the visual spectacle that the skeptics in Mecca were demanding, and the Quran rejects this category entirely.
And instead it offers ayat.
Ayat, which means signs. But the source is very specific about what kind of signs. Not flashing lights in the sky, it offers intellectual signs.
What are some examples?
The source lists them right from the text. The physics of the heavens, the perfect silent orbits of the planets, the mathematical precision of the alternation of night and day.
Things you can study and measure.
Yes. Signs for those who think. Then there's the biology of growth, the sign of rain reviving land that was completely dead and barren, the emergence of vegetation, the whole cycle of life and death and rebirth.
It's like the text is saying, you want a miracle. You want to see something impossible. Look at the fact that you are breathing without thinking about it. Look at the fact that a tiny seed turns into a tree that gives you fruit. Go study the data.
It sounds almost cliche until you really sit with the profundity of it. The source argues that these are true signs because they are constant, they're universal, and they are democratic.
Democratic? How so?
You don't need to be at a specific seance in 19th century London to see the sunrise. You don't need to trust a third-hand rumor from a distant land. You just need to open your eyes and use your mind to study the system that is available to everyone, everywhere, at all times.
And there's one other sign the source mentions, which is a bit different. It's the text itself.
Yes, the literary miracle. The source argues that the Quran presents itself as its own self-authenticating truth. It doesn't point outward and say, believe me because of this magic trick. It points inward.
It makes that famous challenge, right? In Surah 2.23, if you are in doubt about this, then produce a surah like it.
Exactly. It's an intellectual challenge, not a magical one. It's asking for a rival conceptual model, a rival literary production.
Yeah.
The argument, as Ahmed lays it out, is that the text's internal coherence, its linguistic brilliance, and what he calls the lucid joy of its message are the enduring wonder.
It's a continuous marvel rather than a fleeting spark. It appeals to the mind, not just to the eyes.
Which is a much more stable foundation.
Okay, so we have this framework. The universe is a perfect machine. That's the cosmic miracle. And the text is a perfect message. That's the intellectual miracle. Both are stable. Both are open to study. Neither requires a wizard's wand or a house of gold.
That's the theory, yes.
But, and this is a big but, I have to push back here, because we can talk about the systemic God and the perfection of inviolable laws all day long. But if we actually open the book, there are stories in there that seem to smash that whole system to pieces.
So you know exactly where we are going next.
I do. The Red Sea.
The big one, the ultimate magic show.
Section 4. Deconstructing the Red Sea. Because, look, I get the theory, it's elegant, it's clean, but everyone, and I mean everyone, knows the story of Moses. He raises his staff, he hits the water, and whoosh!
Giant vertical walls of wire?
Yes. Walking on dry coral with fish just swimming in the walls next to you like you're in some kind of aquarium tunnel, that is the definition of magic. That is a flagrant, unapologetic suspension of physics. How do you possibly square that with a systemic God?
Well, that image you have, the Charlton Heston image, the Prince of Egypt image, that is what this source calls the cinematic myth. And J.R. Ahmed's analysis takes a sledgehammer to that image.
Okay, I'm listening. Let's unpack this. How do you explain the parting of the Red Sea without breaking the laws of physics?
First thing we have to do is look at the geography. Context is everything. The source clarifies that the original Hebrew term, Yam Suf, which is almost always translated as Red Sea, doesn't really mean that.
It doesn't.
No. A more accurate translation is Sea of Reeds.
The Sea of Reeds. Okay, that sounds smaller and less dramatic.
It is. It refers to the marshy, tidal region of the lakes and inlets that are situated between Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula. Think of the Bitter Lakes region. It's not the deep, open ocean you see in the movies. It's a place defined by shallow waters, reeds, and very, very volatile tides.
Okay, so we're not in the middle of the ocean. We're in a marsh, a tidal zone. That changes the visual immediately.
It changes everything. Now, let's look at the mechanism described in the text itself. The source argues for what it calls a rationalist interpretation. It views the parting of the sea as a perfectly timed natural event.
Natural? How?
Specifically, a massive low tide, or an ebb tide, which was likely exacerbated by a strong, sustained wind.
The text does mention a strong east wind blowing all night.
It does. And wind set down is a real, documented meteorological and fluid dynamics phenomenon. A strong, sustained wind blowing across a shallow body of water for many hours can physically push the water back, exposing the seabed. It happens in places like Lake Erie. It happens in tidal estuaries all over the world.
So the water moving away wasn't magic. It was physics. It was wind and tide.
It was the system doing exactly what the system does under those specific conditions. So what we're looking at is a case of strategic synchronization.
Strategic synchronization. I like that phrase.
Moses isn't creating the low tide. He isn't bending the water with his mind. The tide is an expression of the system. Moses is acting on information. He has knowledge when he strikes the sea with his staff.
It's not a magic zap. It's not a lightning bolt shooting from the tip of the stick.
No. The source describes this staff as a symbol of authority and command. Striking the sea is a signal. It's the go signal. It marks the precise moment, the exact window, when the tide is at its lowest point and the crossing is possible.
So the miracle wasn't that the water disappeared into another dimension for a few hours. The miracle was the timing. It was Moses knowing exactly when to go.
And, just as importantly, Pharaoh not knowing.
Yeah.
That is the absolute key to the whole event.
But wait, I have to stop you there. The text describes the water as being like a huge mountain. The Arabic word used is firk. How do you get a huge mountain out of a low tide in a marsh? That feels like a massive stretch.
This is where the interpretation gets really nuanced and I think really beautiful. The source argues this is a powerful metaphor.
A metaphor for what?
For looming peril. Put yourself in their shoes. You are an escaping slave. You are on foot with your children, your elderly parents. You are crossing a wet, muddy, treacherous tidal flat that you know is usually underwater. You can smell the salt in the mud, deep down in your bones that the tide is coming back.
You'd be terrified.
To the terrified mind, the body of water that is being held back by this natural cycle isn't just water, it is a mountain. It's a mountain of force that is waiting to crash back down.
So it represents the sheer volume and weight of the high tide that is currently being held back.
Exactly. It's a mountain of potential energy. And it's also a psychological mountain, the fear of being overwhelmed, the fear that the system, that nature itself is going to crush you at any second.
Okay, that makes sense. And that brings us to the saltwater paradox. Why did Pharaoh and his army drown?
In the movie version, the magic water walls collapse and chase him down. The water behaves like an intelligent monster. But in this rationalist view, Pharaoh drowned because he ignored the natural law. He ignored the tide.
He saw the Israelites crossing the exposed land, and he just thought, if they can go, I can go. He didn't understand the conditions.
It's pure arrogance. He believed his power as a self-proclaimed god-king could supersede the reality of the physical world. He drove heavy iron-wheeled war chariots into a soggy marsh bed during a turning tide.
That is just a tactical recipe for disaster.
It's just physics. The heavy wheels get stuck in the mud, the horses panic, the army grinds to a halt, and then the system does what the system always does. The wind shifts or dies down, and the tide returns.
The source has this chilling phrase for it, architectural justice. I got chills reading that.
It's such a powerful concept. The tyrant, who claimed to be a god, is consumed by the very system, by nature itself, that he thought he could command. He wasn't struck down by a random lightning bolt. He wasn't fought by a legion of angels.
He was struck down by his own ignorance of the ebb and flow. He tried to fight the ocean, and the ocean predictably won.
So the miracle, the divine act, wasn't the breaking of physics.
It was Moses' knowledge, the guidance.
Yes, the source points to the verse, "My Lord is with me, he will guide me." That guidance wasn't, "I'm going to break gravity for you." It was, "I'm going to show you the path through the system that is already there, but that you can't see." It was a download of information, not a disruption of creation.
This really completely changes how you look at the story. It stops being a fairy tale about a wizard with a stick, and it starts being a profound lesson in reading the room, or reading the universe, really.
And that leads us directly to Section 5. Because the source argues this isn't just about a physical crossing of a marsh. It's about a metaphorical one, a much deeper journey. It's about the two seas.
Okay, this is where it gets really deep. Connect the physical sea crossing to this Quranic concept of al-Bahrain, the two seas.
The Quran speaks in several places of two seas, or two bodies of water, that meet but do not mix. One is described as sweet and palatable, at Furad. The other is salty and bitter, Milijaj. And between them, there is a barzakh, a barrier, that keeps them apart.
Sweet water and salty water. How does this apply to Moses and the escape from Egypt?
The source applies this intertextually as a symbolic framework. Egypt, under the rule of Pharaoh, represents the salty sea.
Why salty?
Think about what salt water represents in this context. You can't drink it to survive. In fact, it dehydrates you and kills you. It doesn't nourish life in the same way fresh water does. It represents stagnation, oppression, the bitterness of slavery.
It's a system that consumes and consumes but doesn't actually give life. It looks powerful and vast like the ocean, but it will kill you if you drink it.
That's a perfect summary. And the sweet sea.
That would be the divine system.
Yes. The system of justice, of liberation, of living in harmony with the natural state of being, or fitra. It's the West Bank of freedom that they're trying to reach.
So the crossing wasn't just moving from point A to point B on a map. It was a fundamental shift from the salty system of man-made tyranny to the sweet system of divine law.
Precisely. And the barzakh, that barrier between them, was the crossing itself, the moment of transition. And the source points out something brilliant about the linguistics here. The Arabic root for splitting the sea, the word faraka, also means to distinguish.
To distinguish, as in to tell the difference between two things.
Exactly. The miracle wasn't just splitting water. It was the act of distinguishing truth from falsehood, the sweet from the salty. It was an epistemological breakthrough.
That's a big word. Epistemological. A breakthrough in how you know things.
It was a breakthrough in knowing. It was the moment the Israelites finally understood that the power of Pharaoh, his chariots, his army, his gold, was an illusion compared to the real underlying power of the system, of God.
The source contrasts the psychological states so beautifully here. You have the Israelites at the edge of the water crying out, "We are overtaken, we're trapped."
They're in a state of complete fear blindness. They see the army behind them, they see the water in front of them, and they see certain death. They see a dead end.
Because they're still mentally trapped in the salty sea. Their minds are still enslaved.
And then you have Moses, who calmly says, "No, my Lord is with me. He will guide me." He sees the path. He sees the solution within the system.
That shift from "we are overtaken" to "he will guide me," that is the internal miracle. The splitting had to happen in their minds before it could happen in the water. They had to separate their fear from their faith in the system.
They had to achieve rationalist certainty, the understanding that there is always a way through if you align yourself with the truth of how the universe actually works.
And Pharaoh, poor arrogant Pharaoh, he was so completely immersed in the salty sea, so stuck in his own bitterness and arrogance and ego that he couldn't see the distinction at all.
He was literally consumed by the salt. It's so poetic. The source calls it the saltwater paradox. He wanted to own the earth. He claimed to be Lord of the world, but the earth swallowed him whole because he didn't respect its fundamental laws.
It's just amazing how this interpretation takes away the magic wand element, but it actually makes the event feel so much bigger, so much more
It
profound.
makes it more relevant because most of us don't face literal armies and parting seas, but we constantly face salty systems.
All the time.
We face systems of oppression or addiction or corporate greed or just our own internal hopelessness. And we look for a magic trick, a lottery ticket to get us out.
But the systemic God of this interpretation says, no, look for the ebb tide, look for the natural cycle, look for the path that is already written into the laws of your reality. You just need the knowledge and the courage to see it.
Exactly. Internalize the miracle. The path isn't created by magic. It is revealed by knowledge and correct timing.
So we've come full circle. We've gone from the dead silence of the hospital ward to the roaring, powerful silence of the tides. We've moved from the deep disappointment of why didn't the leg grow back to the genuine awe of the planets are swimming in perfect silent orbits.
We've moved from the flimsy magic show to the unshakable grand orchestration.
Let's bring this all home, the outro. I want to go back to that soundscape we talked about at the top of the show, the silence.
Because if you accept the thesis of J.R. Ahmed, if you accept this rationalist reading, the silence changes its texture entirely. It's no longer an empty, desolate silence.
No. It's the hum of a massive server room. It's the sound of a perfectly tuned engine that you can't even hear because it's running so smoothly.
Right. Think about it. If you walk into a factory and it's clanging and banging and sparks are flying and steam is shooting out of the pipes, that means it's breaking down. A perfect machine is almost silent. It just works.
So the ultimate argument here is the lack of magical interruptions, the lack of legs popping back into existence, isn't proof that the designer is absent or uncaring.
It's proof that the design is competent, supremely competent.
A god of the gaps needs to keep intervening because he made mistakes in the original design. A systemic god doesn't need to intervene because he got it right the first time. The laws of nature biology, physics, chemistry, these are the continuous acts of God.
They are constant, they are reliable. They are, in essence, the language he speaks.
Which leads to this really, really provocative closing thought from the source. It totally reframes the entire enterprise of science.
It does. We're so used to seeing science and religion as enemies, or at least as two separate realms. Science explores nature. Religion explores God. They don't touch.
But if nature is the book of signs, if the laws of physics are the very words of God written into the fabric of reality, then what is a scientist?
A scientist isn't a secular explorer charting godless territory. A scientist is a reader.
A reader of the divine text.
Exactly. Scientific inquiry becomes a sacred act of reading. When a biologist studies a cell, or an astronomer studies a galaxy, or a geologist studies a rock formation, they are reading the ayat. They are engaging directly with the miracle.
That is a massive shift in perspective. It means the hospital ward isn't a godless place because there are no magic sparks or flashes of light. It's a place filled to the brim with the miracle of biology, the miracle of medicine, the miracle of the human mind being able to understand the body system well enough to fix what can be fixed.
The cure that comes from a surgeon's scalpel or a chemist's drug is not separate from the divine. It is a manifestation of understanding the system the divine created.
So to you, listening right now, maybe you're sitting in your own version of a silent room. Maybe you're waiting for a sign. Maybe you're waiting for the sky to split open and give you an answer.
The source would ask you a simple question. Are you looking for the trick? Are you waiting for the magician to pull a rabbit out of a hat?
Or are you learning to read the system?
Because the magic trick might never come. But the system is all around you, ticking perfectly, humming silently, if you just learn how to listen to the silence.
That's it for this deep dive. A huge thank you to the work of J.R. Ahmed for giving us this incredible lens to look through.
It's definitely a view that stays with you long after you're done reading.
Until next time, keep listening.
And keep reading.